All right, take your seats. We're going to get started. Wallenius Wilhelmsen is a company that is more than 150 years old, one of the most amazing companies I've ever been exposed to. Let me just give you one data point. Across the world, today, I don't know how many ships, but we'll learn in a second, they are moving 55% of all new automobiles made on this planet today. Think about that. That is an amazing logistical challenge. And they're committed to doing it with the least use of fossil fuels possible, with a vision that you're going to hear about of going to zero carbon footprint. So their head of sustainability is with us today. So would you please welcome Roger Strevens. Good to see you.
Good morning, everybody. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to scarcely see you again. So that's the last slide. Can you go to the first slide? We'll get there now just in a moment. So the presentation today is about two elephants. Yes, signals and solutions, a tale of two elephants. And these are the kind of elephants that you find at the back of rooms, boardrooms. They're quite different, as we get to in just a moment. But before starting with that, I'd just like to give you a little bit of orientation on who we are. You knew us as Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics for 7 years up till this point. We've been through a rebranding exercise. The top level now we are Wallenius Wilhelmsen, and the vessels are being rebranded to Wallenius Wilhelmsen in these colors now as well. So as Dane has mentioned, we're operating quite a large fleet, 140 vessels. We have a very large land-based business as well. And I think, as you could see from the other numbers, that we're probably in the small to medium range of global shipping conglomerates. So let's take the first of these elephants. This is the greenhouse gas issue, and I'm specifically talking about shipping in this context. It's something which the industry has needed to address for a long time, and there has been very significant reason for that. It's that shipping, if it continues on its current pathway, could be up to 17% of global CO2 emissions by 2050. Now, these lines are showing you various different pathways, but this needs to be addressed. And so I'd like to tell you about a target which has been set by the International Maritime Organization. This is actually one of a number of the details. This is the main point being that they have set a target of an absolute reduction in the total greenhouse gas emissions of at least 50% by 2050 compared to 2008. And I know that if you're familiar with regulatory language, you'll see that that at least is an open door. This could be revised further as time goes on. This is also this link is tied to the Paris climate goals. Now, you may be forgiven for thinking that this is like Shrek. This is far, far away. But let me just offer this perspective. Think in terms of vessel lifetime. If we started to build a vessel today, it'll be on the water by maybe 2020. And it'll operate for 30 years. And where does that take us to? So this is a deceptively urgent issue. And it begs the question, well, how do we meet the challenge? Now, in this industry, we've been through various major revolutions before us. Our first vessel was sail-powered. And then there was the transition to coal, and that was followed then by diesel. And now we have state-of-the-art hero vessels, hero standing for high-efficiency ro-ro. But what do we come to next? What's not clear is what the transition is to. But how about this? We've got the Orcelle 2050 zero-emissions concept vessel. And that's something which is exciting to work towards. I think that one element of this, which is likely to appear in the next vessels that we build, are wing-type sails. But there's a couple of points that I'd like to add to this. We have to remember about the legacy issue. We've got a world fleet of 50,000 vessels, and of course, they're not using this technology, so how do we address them? And the second point that I really want to focus on is this first and last law of sustainability, as I call it. It's survival. The choices that you make now, they must be consistent with surviving as a business to carry you forward into the long battle towards what's, of course, ultimately about all of our survival. And so, in other words, if what you adopt now is too expensive relative to your competitors, well then you're not going to be around for very much longer. You hand the initiative to the less willing. So that calls for a particular type of solution to really move us forward. And in our business, or in our company, we're focused on lean green solutions. Lean green, incidentally, is the name of our sustainability strategy. And the core premise of that strategy is that what is economical and what is environmental or sustainable can and must be the same thing. That's quite a tall order, but it's possible, and we have found those kinds of solutions here at Oceans Exchange before, and I particularly mentioned the Eco Subsea solution. It's that sort of holy grail of something that makes pure economic sense and, of course, has a huge sustainable or environmental upside. So, one thing about this target, if you're looking for a signal, this couldn't be clearer. We've got a global industry with a huge challenge. A target has been set. Innovators, it's time to get thinking, because this is going to be a very, very big market. Okay, what do we need to achieve this kind of, to meet this challenge? Well, clearly, what has taken us to this point is not going to take us to where we need to go. We need to come up with something different. And I think that fundamentally, we're talking about a challenge of energy storage and energy generation, which of course is a challenge that's far greater and wider than the shipping industry just by itself. And I think that within our industry, we need to bring innovation and the innovation process to a completely different level. We need a global level of focus and coordination that has not happened before. And I think to steal with pride from Dane's inspiring opening remarks yesterday, what we need is to use this Indris net type concept that we have here at Ocean Exchange, where we're all reflecting on ideas which we get from each other, and it continues almost infinitely in terms of its potential. But it also, to me, it's a message for all of us that we need to expand and amplify what we're doing here at Ocean Exchange to bring it to wider networks to really add drive. So I think the message is, it's about asking what you can do for Ocean Exchange rather than what it can do for you. Okay, let's talk about the second elephant. This elephant has been at the back of the room forever. Not many people may be familiar with it. And it's, of course, concerns the whole issue of vessel recycling. What happens to a vessel at the end of its service life? And I'm sorry to tell you that in very many cases, the majority of cases, the end of life for a vessel is pretty horrific. And even though the word scrapping is used, I think that just, for a start, is an indicator of how tone-deaf the industry is on this, because, of course, a vessel has thousands of tons of valuable steel. So it is recycling, but recycling can be good or bad. Too many times, vessels end up on beaches with the most horrific environmental and social impact. It's almost, I would say, that you would have to try hard to find an industrial process which is uglier than this. And why does it happen? Well, regulation is weak. It can be, it's underdeveloped, and excuse the pun, but you can sail around it. However, It is an area which is being changed by other stakeholder views as well, and particularly on the investor side. We've had some interesting developments over the last year where big funds have started asking a lot more questions, and they have even divested of shipping companies who perform badly. As a company, we've been following best practice in vessel recycling, both environmentally, socially, governance, for many, many years. It's just something that we've not talked about. But that needs to change. So, what do we need to fix this situation? And I think transparency is absolutely central. Currently, if you wanted to find out what happens, what a company's practices or its policies, how its performance has been on vessel recycling, well, I wish you luck, because finding that information is extremely difficult, and what you will find will lack consistency or comparability with other data that you might find from other companies. And this status quo, this is what allows the cheap and nasty, and I mean those in the most pure terms, of behaviors to continue. So if we bring transparency to this process, that allows then the various stakeholders, whether the shippers, the people whose cargo we carry, or the investors, or others, to make informed decisions around their choice of investment or operator, carrier, in terms of vessel recycling. And that's exactly what's happening. So there is a new initiative getting underway, a new wave within the industry, the Ship Recycling Transparency Initiative. It should be up and running by the end of this year, and it simply involves disclosing relevant information, and this is all the relevant information because transparency can't be partial, right? To an online platform where it's available then for assessment by interested parties, whether those are the customers or the investors of the industry. Now, we are a founding partner in this initiative, and together with some very other, the usual suspects, I would say. If you think, well, how can this actually change something? And I think it's because of the value that it creates. So let's look at this from the shipper's perspective, the people whose cargo we're moving. First of all, this is about brand protection. We're in an age now where you have to take responsibility for the sustainability of your supply chain. And you've seen a lot of examples of that, where big companies, listed companies, get in a lot of trouble because they have a factory somewhere which is where employees are being treated very poorly. Although that's their supplier, it's their problem. And so this, I believe, this initiative helps to sort of insulate our big customers from the terrible practices of bad beaching. So I think that will resonate with a lot of companies, and I've actually been having those conversations and getting exactly the reaction I was hoping for. In addition, this is a good news story. This is something which can be included in communications for companies, both internally and externally, and it creates goodwill. And this is pretty important too, from the shipper's perspective. This doesn't have to cost them anything. We have never charged our customers for responsibly recycling our vessels. And we have some competitors who take a similar approach, well, one. And then there are others who we know for a fact who've been doing cheap and nasty behavior for a long time. And so, from our perspective, this initiative is good for leveling the playing field so that we all have equal cost when it comes to recycling, because responsible recycling, of course, costs more than the alternative. So I think that this is something that really has potential. But the fascinating bit, I think, is in its gearing. This is something where one small cog in the industry can drive a much wider change, and this is how I see that playing out. So with the SRTI, a basis for making informed decision-making is created. And with that, carriers can take that, we will take it to our customers, and it will explain the risks and the benefits of the risks of the current situation, of the status quo, and the benefits of demanding transparency. It's something that they could include as a minimum requirement for carriers to do business with them. At the same time, of course, there are environmental NGOs and the media who can pick this up and talk about, Well, transparency. This can really change things because, after all, who wants to disclose bad performance? But there's something else to it as well. In our business, if there was just, for example, a very large customer, one from Europe, one from Asia, one from North America here, and if they required transparency as a minimum for doing business, that would effectively set a de facto standard for our segment. And I think that principle can also hold true for other segments in shipping. And so what we could work towards then is just making the world a little bit better. And I think that's a really, really cool and exciting initiative to be working with. So, to draw this to a close, this picture is actually not being taken very far away from here. And I think it was quite a good metaphor, actually, when I saw it, for the kinds of things we're trying to do. When it comes to finding those exciting new solutions and for driving the kind of change that I talked about just now with recycling. And incidentally, that solution, that's not about new technology, but it's about aligning the understanding how to work the levers of industry to achieve something better. And both of these initiatives, we can certainly give them a hard shove from our side, but we need help. And so that's where the tugboats come in here. We're all trying to work in the same direction. We're trying to reach that sort of better place. And so I think the conclusion here is that sustainability, it starts in Savannah and the ocean exchange, of course. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Roger.